59.
I'm saying to people I've never met before in my life, I don't completely understand the concept of that. There's no budget for any of it.
You go to others, though.
You
know what? It is what it
When we
is.
have this
though.
full plan of goals,
Some things you can
how do you
actually
figure out, I mean,
push
how
off.
the budget for it?
Another thing.
Who
Your
determines
car
the
is
base
only
size?
$50 or $100.
So I try,
$1,000 here, and you go around
on alternates, and give them an extra chair.
22.
For a sequel. She doesn't go, American way, so they actually all operate, so I went in.
Well,
and
it's been
Dylan was there, so
it's
so
a
he-
little,
he
yeah,
had-
but it's been the wind lately, it's been the heat, it's been.
Notice on the back, it's better than the front, because the warrior. Welcome to the May 2nd, 2023 session of Quispamsis Town Council. May I have an approval of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried. What are we? 6-0. I have a few comments this evening. I'd like to start by thanking the Deputy Mayor for filling in this chair a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't able to be here. And she is absent this evening, but I did want to acknowledge her work. And thank you to many who reached out to me out of kindness and support when I wasn't able to be here. In an announcement that was just made a few minutes ago, the Quispamsis Climate Change Committee has partnered with the Kennebecasis Public Library and 2 local bike shops to purchase and donate 4 new bicycles to the library. The donation is one of the committee's climate change and energy initiatives to promote active transportation in the community. The bicycles are now available to the public for a 7-day loan through the library's Object Lending Program. And we would like to thank Millennium Cycle and Sport and Bikes and Beans for their partnership in this program. And there's still time for you to assist the town of Quispamsis with refreshing its website at quispamsis.ca. So visit the town's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts, and you'll find a link there where you will be asked a few questions about where you would like to go to find certain pieces of information on the town's website. The process is free and anonymous and takes only a few seconds of your time. And you'll be helping create the new look for our website. The link will be active until 9 p.m. tonight. The committees under the RSC have been established for the 4 pillars identified by the provincial government as now being the responsibility of the municipalities of the Fundy region. The Economic Development Tourism file remains under contract with Envision. Community Development is chaired by St. John Deputy Mayor John McKenzie. Regional Transportation is chaired by Granby Westfield Mayor Brittany Merrifield. And Regional Facilities is chaired by Rossay Mayor Nancy Grant. Each of these committees have met once. At their respective meetings, the groups convened with a consulting company to assist in developing a strategic plan for each pillar. The RSC budget, of which these committees are a part, will be expected to be ready for the fall. The task is daunting in that they met for their first meeting in April, and they are expected to roll out their budgets for each pillar in July. The provincial government has the RSC on an extremely tight timeline. I will be meeting with the Minister of Local Government this week to express some of the successes that we have accomplished, but also to express some of the challenges that are met through this new downloading of some of the responsibilities. Congratulations to one current and one former member of the Quispamsis Regional Police Force who were invested into the Order of Merit of the police forces in recent ceremonies. Corporal Eugene Belleville was invested as a member of the Order, while former Police Chief Wayne Gallant was promoted to an officer. They are recognized for their leadership and exceptional service to their community and their country. And I've worked with both of these gentlemen, and I have to say, the work that they do and that Chief Wayne had done in the past is exemplary, and I was so proud to be able to work with them at the Quispamsis Regional Police Force. I also want to congratulate Kelly Lynch on her induction into the Softball New Brunswick Hall of Fame in the Builder category. Kelly founded the KV Girls Softball Association, and her name is synonymous with softball in our community. The honor is well earned and much deserved. May is Huntington's Disease Awareness Month. Huntington's disease is a fatal genetic disorder that has no cure. It is often described as having ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's all at the same time. Quispamsis Town Hall has been lit up with purple lights as part of the Huntington Society of Canada's Light It Up for HD campaign. The purple lights will return to Town Hall on May 12th, the 31st anniversary of Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. Recent statistics say that over 1.5 million Canadians have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and others are awaiting a diagnosis. To help raise awareness, the purple lights will be on from dusk on May 12th to dawn on May 13th. Those are my notes for today, and we will go to Councillor Bigger for the treaty acknowledgement and moment of reflection.
Thank you, Your Worship. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Quispamsis exists on the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Maliseet, and Micmac people, whose ancestors, along with Passamaquoddy tribes, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. We would like to take this moment to pay respect to the elders, past and present, and the descendants of this traditional territory. We also would like to take this moment to reflect on our solidarity and support for the people of Ukraine, acknowledging that Canada has the third largest Ukrainian population in the world, behind Ukraine itself and Russia. And may we remind ourselves of the important work we have before us tonight. May we make good decisions without prejudice or bias, and always in the best interests of our community, which we are here to serve.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. On to item number 4, disclosure of interest. If anyone has anything to disclose this evening, we will move on to item number 5, seeing there are none. Presentations. 5A, Quispamsis Valley Food Basket, proposed building expansion at 346 Hampton Road. And our presenters this evening are Kathy and Brian Rignanesi. Welcome. Please come to the podium.
So my name is Brian, of the Board of Directors for the Quispamsis Valley Food Basket. And with me tonight is Kathy Rignanesi, who is the treasurer. And the purpose of our presentation is to outline for you plans that we have for the expansion of the food basket and how the town of Quispamsis could play an important part in those plans. Slide 3. Okay. The Quispamsis Valley Food Bank, Inc. is a registered charity formed in 1985 as a stopgap measure when our communities were faced with many of the same economic challenges that we see today. Well, here we are 38 years later. continuing to support people and families in our communities faced with food insecurity. We have a paid part-time coordinator who manages a core group of around 40 volunteers who help to shop for, receive, sort, and store food donations, stock shelves, fridges and freezers, greet clients, and prepare food hampers for distribution. Currently, our volunteer numbers are growing as we see a rise in client numbers to pre-COVID-19 levels. We serve our clients on a once-a-month basis from the towns of Quispamsis and Rothsay and some outlying areas. The town of Quispamsis is and has been all along a strong supporter of the food basket, leasing us a current billing at very favorable rates and covering the cost of utilities, insurance, and ground maintenance. In 2022, we saw an increase in clients of 15% over 2021, and that continues to grow with new families seeking our support almost weekly. In September 2022, we served 390 clients. That was 249 adults and 141 children. In the first 3 months of 2023, we have served an average of 300 clients a month, and again, approaching pre-COVID levels. These statistics show a need for us to improve our current physical location to enhance our operation by improving the safety and efficiency in receiving, sorting, storing, and distribution of our food donations and purchases. We also want to expand our service to our clients by providing space for confidential meetings, as well as workshops on financial literacy, budgeting, nutrition, meal planning, healthy eating, as well as income tax preparation, for example. So our board has considered two options. One is a new building at a cost of approximately $600,000. The second option is to renovate and expand the existing location at a cost of approximately $430,000. Option two is for us the most realistic, and also it's the preference of our board of directors. So we have the financial ability to cover the cost of option two, as well as the ongoing cost of the operation of the expansion and renovation due to the extremely generous support of the town, community donations, and investments. So slides 7 through 14 better illustrate these plans. Slides 7 and 8 show our current facility. Slides 9, 13, and 14 show the renderings for the proposed renovation and expansion. And slides 10, 11, and 12 show existing as well as renovated floor plans. So we are currently awaiting results of soil samples taken in April to confirm that the soil conditions at the current location will support the requirements for construction of the expansion. We'll also need the town's permission to complete land surveys and support with any needed zoning changes. So based on receiving positive results from these samples and surveys, we respectfully request that the town of Quispamsis consider donating the current building and property or enter into a long-term lease agreement with the KV Food Basket to allow us to move this project forward. Ongoing financial support from the town would also be critical to our continued operation. Based on the response to our request, we will also be making a presentation to the town of Rothsay to seek increased and ongoing financial support for our food basket. So in conclusion, on behalf of the board of directors, our volunteers, and our clients, I would like to thank the former and present mayor and councils for your incredible support for our operation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rignanesi, and it certainly speaks volumes to the caliber of people that we have in this community when we look at 40 people who are willing to volunteer so much time and dedication to the service of serving others. And, you know, when we look at that and see that the need that is in this community, you know, 300 clients a month, and you're open, I think, for possibly 5 if there are 5 Tuesdays in a month. I don't know if that happens
correct.
from time to time, but that is extremely significant. So so thank you both for all the work that you do. Councillor Donovan, please.
Thank you. And thank you very much for your presentation. I'm certainly very proud of all that you guys do for our community. It's certainly, as you would know, it's a very big undertaking, and it takes a special type of person to be able to pull all that together. So I'm very appreciative, as I'm sure we all are, of all the work that you guys do. So in saying that, I would move that Kathy and Brian Rignassi be thanked for their informative presentation, and council support the Kennebecasis Valley Food Basket and its plans to expand and renovate the town-owned building at 346 Hampton Road, thereby granting permission for the KV Food Basket to complete the necessary land surveys, ground and soil samples, including permission to encroach on additional land near the Quispamsis Memorial Arena as needed, agree to entertain any zoning changes required, continue to financially support the Kennebecasis Valley Food Basket on an annual basis, and lastly, assuming favorable testing results and any zoning changes, the town at that time consider either gifting the land and building to the Kennebecasis Valley Food Basket or entering into a long-term lease agreement with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bigger, please. It's been moved by Councillor Donovan.
Second the motion.
Seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, please. Anyone have any further comments that they would like to share?
While my microphone's on, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly say, I just wanted to say how impressed I am with the financials that you've been able to maintain. And as you say, the need continues to kind of shoot back up to pre-COVID-19 levels. Looking over the report of the families that you've served in the greater KV area, the need is great. People sometimes make the mistake, as you've instructed us when we did a tour, that living in a community that is sometimes thought to be very affluent, needs are still there. So it's wonderful work that you're doing. We're very fortunate to have the dedication of you guys and all of the great volunteers and people who connect and work so hard. And just wanted to say it's really something, I think. It's a real accomplishment to be able to come in and ask us to partner with you in some way on this, but have such a great, healthy balance sheet related to your request. So congratulations on that. I just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0 unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for all the work that you do in our community.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Thank you. Item 5B, proposed seasonal watercraft rentals operation. If there were other people here representing the food bank, thank you also for being here and also for the work that you do. Thanks very kindly. Item 5B, proposed seasonal watercraft rentals operation at Meenan's Cove and Gondola Point beaches. Good evening. Would you please give us your name for the clerk?
John O'Brien. John O'Brien, yeah.
Welcome, John.
Right, it's first time here. So it's probably going to be a lot more questions and stuff, but basically what I've got going on here is thank you everyone for allowing me to come, I guess. What I'm trying to do tonight is I'm seeking approval to move forward with a new business venture that I've come up with, and I think Quispamsis kind of could really use a little oomph in their, like summer entertainment. And the beaches around, I'm more focused on Meehan's Cove now, so the Gondola Point I don't want to focus on two spots at once. So Meehan's Cove would be my first choice. And what I'm seeking is approval to rent by the hour jet skis. So I want to start with 2 jet skis at the beach and have a little area, and with all the proper, the insurance, the licensing or the liability insurance and all that covered, and the machines are brand new, and I want to go by the hour, and I want to, you know, kind of partner with you guys or work with you to figure out how I can move forward with this. Kind of provide a little more entertainment to the beach and hopefully draw more people in and keep people around here instead of going, you know, elsewhere. So I know there's probably going to be some questions and stuff. I don't know if you want to move right to that because I don't want, you know what I mean? I don't want to start a whole lot of into my business until I know that you guys are on board with it. Do you know what I mean? So this would be the first step, but I have covered a lot of things. I guess one would be mainly in Canada, you need to have a boat license, right, to operate a watercraft of any sort with a motor. And there is actually something that we have planned to go with. So Transport Canada is who regulates the watercraft, you know, licensing in Canada. And one of the options they have is it's proof of competency. So we as a business take a course put on by them, and then we're allowed to offer what's called a rental boat safety checklist. Every time someone comes in and rents, you know, wants to rent, we go through a briefing with them. Like first it's a screening, then it's a briefing, and they do a checklist, and they go over basic, you know, safety rules. And if they pass it, they can go. And it's only good for the time they're on the boat. So when they come back, it doesn't give them any kind of like go home and go fishing type of thing. It's just for that one rental period. That was kind of a big one that we were worried about, right? Like, you can't expect everybody to have a boat license, but that's something that Transport Canada does offer, right, from their main page. If you guys have Google Maps, I could kind of show you what my tentative plan is, if you want. I have a picture of it here, but like where I want to set up and stuff, and
I think, John, that would be between you and staff at a later
Yeah,
time.
all right.
This evening, your presentation is to inform council of what your intent is.
Yeah.
And we would not be deciding on where you would be located. That
Okay.
would be left to staff
for them?
to decide on that.
all right.
I don't know if Director of Community Services would like to comment on that, or if I'm okay just allowing John to go forward and having council ask some questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. O'Brien and I have talked on the phone a couple of times, and we really didn't want to go down the path of a conversation in details until we knew that this was something that council was going to approve. So, and once we have the decision of council, then we would have the further conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Barton-Dixon. So your presentation this evening is to tell us what you
Yeah.
what your intent is.
Yeah.
So we understand that, and I will go now and see if council has any questions about it. And Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the proposal.
Yeah.
I have some questions here, put here by the Director of the Director of Community Services, Dana Burton-Dixon. And I'd like to know what the answer is to those questions. I don't know if they were shared with, I don't think you've shared those questions yet.
Sorry.
Through you, Your Worship, Mr. O'Brien, as I mentioned, have had a couple conversations on the phone, and I went through the list of potential questions that council would have, that could possibly have, so I don't have the answers to those questions.
I've got some answers if you want to, like for, did you want to ask the questions or do you want me to cover some more information? Like noise, he means, for example?
No, just if I can continue here.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You've already said you're gonna have two jet skis.
Yep.
What about a rescue boat or some?
Yeah, so that's something we want to work with you, right? Like if you guys decide you want us to have a rescue boat, like we could go with getting a third jet ski and helping guide people out past all the people and then letting them go from there, right? Like follow me, and then when you get out to here, we can have that, or we can option to just have the Coast Guard and the fire department on board with it and see what their rescue plan is, because we're not I'm not like a rescuer, but I can drive like I can go out and save someone if they're lost or if they're, if they break down. We want to have some way to go out and get somebody if they break down, right?
Yeah.
So we do have plans for, we want to get the venture off the ground, but we want to do it, with you guys, like above board and just kind of.
I think there's a lot of responsibility with putting a power machine in the hands of people with maybe not a lot of experience.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is there an age limit or
Yeah, there
restriction
is.
that
Yeah.
way?
So for the age limit, what we're thinking is, so if you're 18, you're gonna be 18 years old, straight out, to even be considered to drive it. We're gonna obviously do the photo ID and all that. So if you're 18 with a boat license, then you've obviously been certified to, you know what the boat rules are. If you're 18 without a boat license, you have to do we're gonna make everyone do our thing anyway, our checklist, through Transport Canada. Now, if you're, say you're 18 and you have a young kid, or 19, that's below 18, anyone below 18 has to be accompanied by an adult or their parent or someone that's 25. So we don't want anybody that's 21 taking their niece out, right? So if you know what I mean, if you're under 18, you have to be accompanied by someone that's 25 or older, or if you're 18 years old of age, you can operate. You can't take anyone below 18 unless you're 25, pretty much.
Right, so is there, are the skidoos or sea-doos, are they going to have governors on them?
They're the smallest size they offer, so I mean that's an option. People often rent these things for the like they don't want to go out and go super slow, but we're looking at the smallest ones they have for sale. The Sparks, they're nothing crazy. They're not super crazy ones. It's the smallest one they offer. They're brand new. Governors is an option if we find people are careless. We could put that on for sure. Yep.
Will there be employees at your work area?
Yeah, that'll be to start. It'll be me. Yeah. So just to get it off the ground, I'll be starting the operation up and working with Dana and maybe the Me and Scove Beach House to see kind of what they want to do. Hopefully, there's a little hut there that they have with a picnic table. I wanted to see if they'll allow us to kind of convert it seasonally.
What about insurance liability and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we're gonna have insurance and liability. I have a mentor that's helping me with this stuff, and he has vast amounts of businesses around here in Quispam. So he's kind of walking me through all that stuff. Yeah, we'll have all that. And there'll be a waiver and a liability form that you have to sign. And the part of this checklist is like, we don't want to have negligence, you know what I mean? Like someone that's drinking and we're like, and we ask them, are you drinking? And they say no. And then they go out and find out later that they're drinking. We're going to have a part of our, our liability form and all that, we'll say, so it'll cover that if they are drinking. It won't be just a word of mouth. It'll be them that says like, no, I wasn't.
You've got a document that they sent.
Yeah, they got a document that they said they weren't drinking beforehand, and then do the 5-minute checklist on an iPad. It's like a briefing of boater safety, and they have to pass it. That's through Transport Canada.
Okay. So, thank you, Worship. Just a couple more questions.
Yep.
What are the hours of operation that you're considering?
So, I mean, obviously sunny days. We don't want to operate, we don't want to bug the residents, obviously. So we're thinking maybe like 10 a.m. and then somewhere's around 7:37 at night, 10 to 7. Seems fair. Like the boats out there, I've been around this area my whole life, and boats run around there all hours of the night and can be annoying.
Yeah.
So we thought that, who's gonna not like, or who's gonna have something wrong with a boat or a couple jet skis, right? Mixed in with all that from 10 to 7 at night. We didn't think it would be too bad of a problem. Maybe 5 on Sunday.
Have you been have you been considering any fee back to the town of Quispamsis?
Yeah, we were figuring out, well, that would be something, maybe 5% or something commission, or like, I don't know, it's my first time with this, but I guess the only two options would be a commission of what you make, or just straight rent. You know what I mean? But if things aren't busy for me, then rent can be a burden on your company, right? So it may work hand in hand, I guess, if it's commission, right? That helps everybody win, doesn't it? I think.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. So the purpose of the presentation this evening is to see if council has an appetite for this particular activity at one of our beaches. It does align with the economic development theme of the strategic plan. Any of these questions would have to be vetted through staff. That's not something that we would be
Okay.
asking at this point.
Yeah.
So the question this evening is there an interest through council? And if so, we will ask for a motion to have staff delve into it with the questions that we have in our package.
Yeah.
If anyone would like to. Councillor Thompson.
I just had a question.
Did you want to ask your question?
Well, I was just going to ask a couple more questions.
If those are questions that are better asked by staff and answered by staff, because they would be doing the details of this rather than us. And then if it comes back as a proposal for us to vote on, then we can find out if those questions have been answered, because I'm sure that staff would be the ones that would have to tease out any of the details, safety details and so. Are you okay with that, Councillor Thompson, or did you want to ask your question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. So there's no recommendation here. It just says staff will await guidance from council on how they wish to proceed. But without understanding exactly what is going on, I'm certainly not prepared to say I want to have this here or I don't want to have this here, because I really, I don't know where you plan on being on the beach. I don't know.
Right.
Are you taking the jet skis home every day after?
That's a good question. So, I mean, I want my jet skis to be, safe too. So I do plan to pull them out every night. I mean, obviously, I'd like the ability to leave them in if that's gonna make this not go forward, then I'll pull them out at night. But that, like, I just want to make it kind of go. So if pulling them out at night is what you want, then that's what it will do. But fueling it and stuff, right? Like, they'll be fueled in the mornings at the gas station, so there's no fueling by the water. And then if they happen to run out of fuel, we've done the math on it, and we should get a pretty much the full day out of it. But if you didn't, they'll be pulled out of the water, right? And Daly's isn't far, or jerry cans on a spill pad mat that we found that you can do, right? Up on the asphalt, there'll be no fueling inside down in the water, right? We don't want to jeopardize our water any more than anyone else does, right?
Okay, so my next question would be to our director of Dana. I don't know whether, is there it says if we have an appetite for this, but I don't know whether I have an appetite for this. I don't even know where you plan on putting the jet skis, where they're going to be stored, where they're launching from. I have no idea on that. So there's a lot of questions in order to, for me as a counselor to say, yeah, this is a great idea, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just have several concerns
Right.
of location. There's still a lot of questions that I have.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a question for Mr. O'Brien as well, so I'll ask that one first. Have you ever, hey, I'll preface this by a bit of a thought. So I've seen this happen in many different places, whether it's Kelowna, what have you, and generally safe, but you also get people, regardless they're 18 or 45, that have never driven one of these before, and I've seen them crash into docks. I've seen them crash through swimming areas.
Right.
So kind of like, so the question is, I need to see all the information through some of the questions that Councillor Olson was asking, and I think what Councillor Thompson's looking for is we need to have all those questions kind of answered and thought out before we can say yes or no. But I won't do a motion yet because I know Mr. Bigger has a question. But the question for you was, have you looked at Renforth? Because you got a wharf there, you've got everything else. You don't have a lot of swimmers down at the wharf down there. That's just a comment, because Quispamsis Beach would be tough because it's also a dog-friendly beach, and everything else you're gonna be a bit different there.
We didn't look at Renforth yet, no. I mean, we were this is our first place we wanted to try. Just seemed like some of the reason we wanted to was because you get people on the beach that are just there hanging out, right? And they don't just come for the rentals. They're already there laying on the beach, and maybe like these types of businesses grow legs sometimes, right? So maybe we'll start renting sun chairs if that's an availability to people on the beach. You know what I mean? Like just having some, like, and selling water and stuff. We're not going to get into anything obviously crazy. We want to sell rentals on jet skis, but we don't want it to be a totally online thing where, like, you look us up and say, okay, hey, I'm going to come down to Renforth and rent your things for an hour and then leave. We want there to be a little bit of, hustle bustle, a little buzz at the beach. And as far as you said with the docks and people crashing and stuff, that's something that we're going to try and vet from their checklist, like the Transport Canada thing. And if we have to, like I was saying earlier, we might have to lead them out of the beach area, kind of follow us. No going above 10 kilometers an hour on it in this area for wake reasons, like for other boats. And then when you're out past that, do your thing. And when it gets close to their time, I drive out, meet them at the checkpoint spots, and they follow me back in.
Yeah, okay. No, I'll leave it for Mr. Rigger, but I guess my comment would be, I would need to see all those different things first.
Yeah.
I'm interested in something that works for both the town and for the residents, whether we even have a station out there where you bring them to there, because also, anyways, I just need to see a lot more information and feedback after that information, all the details are given to our town, then come back. But if you want to do that, you probably got to come back in May, like the next meeting to do that. So, I mean, the idea is it happens everywhere, but I don't know enough information yet to say. No.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to get things going, I'm going to make a motion to direct staff to further engage with Mr. O'Brien to explore the feasibility of operating a jet ski business at Means Cove Beach and reporting back to council, or I don't know if we want to put that as a motion, or getting Mr. O'Brien to come back to council once maybe some things are flushed out. So I guess I'll maybe ask the clerk what would be the better motion.
Your Worship, it sounds like council is looking to refer to staff to seek more clarification from the applicant and bring back recommendations to council.
So it's been moved by Councillor Luck, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, please vote now. Councillor Bigger. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Mr.
guys.
O'Brien.
Thanks,
We'll be hearing
everyone.
from you again, I'm sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good evening. The motion's already been made. Perhaps you could direct it to the Director of Community Services, okay? Thank you. Item 5C, Transportation Master Plan. This evening we have presenter Mr. Ryan Elzigar, team leader, Transportation Engineering Andrew Northmore, Transportation Safety Engineer, and Globe Engineering Consultants. Welcome, gentlemen. Please give your name for the clerk.
My name is Andrew Northmore. So thank you. I'm good to go.
Just one second. Mr. Loge?
Your Worship, just to give a little bit of context for council, members of council. If you recall, we've taken the last year, we started with a two-part transportation master plan review where we wanted to look at the community as a whole, what existed as far as our transportation network, some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, and then look at a future projection of how we wanted to deal with the network as we go forward. With the plan, we're at the stage now where this presentation to council is really the culmination of the document so that we can get it formally presented to mayor and council. Then we'll be looking for feedback from council, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this evening by virtue of questions. It can be feedback to staff directly so that we can follow up. But also we'll be looking to have this particular presentation out as a document for public review. So essentially we'll be coming back in a final format with some clarifications before we adopt it. Another thing to remember with the transportation master plan is it's going to structure a lot of the strategic initiatives that council has identified over time. It's going to be used when we look at our levels of service documents that we want to produce. It's going to be used for future budgets and our asset management plan. So this really is a cornerstone document on a go-forward basis when it comes to the comprehensive look that we want to take at the network within the community. So it's really just a caveat so that it doesn't end here. It's basically, this is essentially the starting point. This is a document that we're going to be building off of as we go forward. It's really the context so that when the time comes for discussion, we recognize that we have the opportunity to evolve this and mold it and get it to a point where we're comfortable with it on a go-forward basis, Your Worship.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Loge. Certainly appreciate it. And now you may start.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. And also thank you for the preamble, Gary. So yes, I'm Andrew Northmore, and I was one of the authors of the Transportation Master Plan that we developed at Englobe in partnership and under the direction of city staff, town staff. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'll be giving some background as to what the context is for this document. Before getting into some of the technical pieces, we'll be talking about some of the anticipated growth in the town over the next 10 to 20 years that we assumed in doing some of our work that led into the types of road network improvements that would be required over that sort of horizon to be able to support the growth. And then from there, we'll go into talking about the active transportation network improvements that we recommended, as well as the discussion we had on local transit opportunities and some items on policy updates and infrastructure. So much like Gary said, the objective for this study was to re-envision the town's transportation needs and develop a vision for moving forward with. And within that, the key focus was on a lot of the areas that I just listed. So the road network, the AT network, transit, as well as various policies and infrastructure that help support the decision-making when it comes to individual projects. So within the town, I guess first with this project, we did a full background document looking at what the context is currently within Quispamsis. And various things that we identified include the changing population, The town has a population that's both growing as well as getting older. So with growth and with changing age come different transportation needs. There's a strong desire for improved active transportation, as we found through the survey that we conducted, as well as all the information that we were receiving from city staff. There are some issues with traffic management that cause some strain in the community, both in traffic calming in some areas where people may feel that people are going too fast on local roads or shortcutting through them, as well as congestion at a few key intersections and corridors. I'm sure I don't have to explain to you all that the town has a layout that kind of funnels everybody through a handful of intersections, and that those can become a problem during peak times. And lastly, we found that there was a strong desire for a safe and well-maintained network with robust and reliable options for residents, so that people didn't feel like they had to drive to get somewhere. If they wanted to, there was like a sidewalk available for them to walk, or safe facilities for them to be able to bike on, or take some mode of transportation that suits their needs. So for the anticipated growth, next slide, we did a quick look at the travel demand outlook for the town. So looking at the growth historically through Statistics Canada data, we expect that there will be modest growth through the town that'll just have an increasing demand on the collectors and arterial roadways, so the major roadways that go through the town. The aging population, as it steadily ages, older people, especially as you get into retirement, they tend to still get out and have to move around to places, but it's not at the same time that commuting traffic does, so the traffic patterns tend to change. Commuting in general is likely to still remain personal vehicle based, unless there are some very extremely radical changes in how transit is provided in the town, just by the nature of so much of commuting traffic going between here and the city of St. John. Personal vehicles are likely to continue being the mode of choice. But there are several unknowns when trying to think about travel demand looking forward. Trends towards remote work, technological advances in mobility, as well as what the actual development within the town ends up being. For example, within the town's strategic plan, looking at creating a commercial industrial hub, those sorts of things would affect travel demand as well. So for our study, trying to envision what the road network would look like over the next 10 or 20 years, we got the town to put together basically what the maximum build out for residential development could be on existing properties throughout the town that are undeveloped. So like I said, this was developed with basically looking at what the land area was, how it's currently zoned, what sorts of infrastructure are currently going to these locations, to try to figure out how many dwelling units could potentially be developed on each of these areas. Then with that map, which you see here on the slide, our team then took a look at what could realistically be built out in a 10-year horizon as well as a 20-year horizon, following the historical Statistics Canada growth over the last decade, projecting that forward. And ultimately we found, that the majority of the development in those timelines would be within the Hampton Road Town Center area, Hampton Road along between Model Farm and Stock Farm, along Pettingill Road, and on Meenan's Cove Road. And that was really just a reflection of where the infrastructure currently exists to support some of this development, as well as kind of branching outwards where it's most likely to get to within a 20-year horizon. So then that leads us to talking about what the road network future needs are. So ultimately, we used all of that growth information to figure out how many trips would be added to the network using trip generation models from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and added them all on following traffic flow patterns to figure out what the travel demand would be on the 5 signalized intersections in town, and looked at how their level of service we would expect to evolve over the coming decades, and what sorts of improvements might be required going forward to help support those traffic volumes. So 3 of the intersections we ended up finding might require some form of upgrades, and those included Hampton at Campbell and Pettingill, where in the 10-year horizon, there's likely going to be a need for turning lane upgrades. In the 20-year horizon, there will likely need to be a much more involved study of the corridor to identify what sort of transportation improvements are required. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. For Gondola Point Arterial and Millennium Drive, there would potentially be a need for an additional southbound through lane or a conversion to a roundabout in the future. And similarly, at the Arterial and Hampton Road, that's an intersection that could be a candidate for a roundabout in the long term. So like I teased you on the last slide, Hampton Road is a complicated corridor when looking at the road network, but not just the road network, but everything else that's going on in the area. And this kind of jumps ahead a little bit into the active transportation discussion. But the stretch of Hampton Road through the kind of like urban developed area of the town would ultimately require a more in-depth corridor study than what we did as this kind of high-level planning exercise. And that's just due to the various competing needs in the corridor in terms of not just accommodating the vehicles, which the road does a pretty good job of right now, but accommodating improved active transportation facilities, managing the delay at intersections for vehicles, especially in like the 10 and 20-year horizons, managing school zone traffic, which was identified as an issue, optimizing the road cross section. So there's some opportunity for potentially having a road diet where some of the 4-lane sections right now are narrowed down to 3, where you could have just like a central 2-way left turn lane that people could use to get out of the way of through traffic, as well as using this as an opportunity to expand the water system and other utilities that would ultimately be needed to support the increased development that's in large part expected to happen through this area. One of the other needs that we found, or that we looked into, was access to Parkside and French Village. So we looked at a handful of different options of what could be potential ways to improve access to this area, to both of these areas. And some of them are illustrated on the map as well as documented in the report. Ultimately, we felt that having a connector that goes between Parkside and French Village would be the preferred option, either on what we call the Elliott Connector or the Clyde Drive extension. And in both of those cases, we would also expect the town to be putting in an active transportation facility that helps to better connect, especially French Village, with the rest of the town in terms of active transportation. And then 2 other things that we looked into were the need for an additional connector between Hampton and Pettingill. So the intersection between those 2 roads is one of the most congested in the town and will certainly become a problem within the 20-year horizon that was in our study. But when we were looking at it, we found that you wouldn't really need to have an additional connection between them before the 2042 horizon, and that even considering that, there's not really much in terms of good alternatives to provide that connection, just due to the topography, the CN rail constraints, as well as property constraints that are all along the corridor. And one other consideration in our report was with regard to blanket speed limits. So blanket speed limits, just in case you're not aware, it's a policy that several larger cities in Canada have started implementing to try to take their local 50 zones and just by kind of at like a broad scale, reduce the speed limits on them down to 40 or 30 kilometers an hour. And largely that's done through Vision Zero initiatives, trying to have 0 serious injury or fatal collisions on roads because speed is the leading main factor that leads to high severity collisions. Though when we were looking at case studies where those policies have been effective at actually delivering lower speeds, a lot of the local roads through the town of Quispamsis don't really fit the same mold as a lot of the downtown roads through like Toronto or Calgary would, where they have sidewalk on both sides, curb, the development is right up near the side of the road, and there's just lots of friction in the driving environment that kind of helps to get people to go slower because they're looking out for more things. And that doesn't quite fit as well with a lot of the local roads through the town where there's maybe open ditch drainage and the houses are built really far back. And there's not really a lot to indicate to drivers that traveling at a lower speed is appropriate. So that's not to say that we don't think any roads in the town should be posted at a lower speed limit, but they should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to it just being a blanket application of a lower speed limit. Next. All right, so that was it for the road network improvements, and now we're talking about active transportation. So transportation traditionally has been very vehicle focused. So normally, basically the way that most communities were designed throughout North America was putting the car first and people, cycling, transit near the end of the priority list. But in order to create an effective active transportation network, you basically need to flip that model to have a very people-centric system. I'm sure that many of you would have seen a picture of basically like a road in a large city with people spaced out standing with how far apart they are when they're all in cars versus how far apart they are when they're all on bikes versus how far apart they are when they're on a bus, and just showing you how like much little space people actually take up and how much of that space is cars. So yeah, like in order to help really get people moving throughout the town, it's important to have a very people-centric approach on roads that are important for active transportation. Now, that's not to say that all roads have to have the same focus. By that, we mean there are going to be some roads where it's more important to focus on moving cars and trucks, especially when you start talking about like the Gondola Point Arterial. It's important to keep cars moving on Hampton Road, but that also has to be balanced with the need for people to be moving when they're walking or cycling as well. So the focus of each road can be different just depending on what the priorities are. But it's important that at least in order to have a good AT network, some roads do have to be people-centric. And that's kind of the focus that we were looking at here. So we went through and we did an exercise to figure out what we would feel that an appropriate active transportation map for the town would be. That would really help to bridge a lot of the gaps between existing parts of the network where you do have active transportation facilities. And to do that, we referenced largely from the Transportation Association of Canada's Design Guide for Canadian Roads, which has fairly extensive criteria for what sort of traffic volumes, operating speeds would be appropriate for different types of cycling facilities mostly. And we also considered what the topography of the town is, as well as what the likely right-of-way is, or existing right-of-way is through each of the corridors. So when we came up with this map, the idea wasn't that this was going to be a perfect 100% implementable thing. It would all require more detailed study of each project, but we tried to come up with something that would at least be realistically implementable, maybe with some minor tweaking here and there. Now, that does end up creating a map that does look like there were a whole bunch of crayons taken and drawn over everything, and I know that that can be kind of hard to follow with all the colors. But we have a couple, so on here we have a couple different types of multi-use path. Ones like the QR trail that are fully outside of a road right-of-way are in green. Then there are some that we're recommending to have a multi-use path that's along the roadside. So those are cases like what we have for Millennium, as well as Hampton Road and the Gondola Point. Then the arterial is, I think that is a outside clear zone multi-use path in the sort of yellowish color. But most of the colors that you see through the rest are the light blue, which is a shared facility. So on those, you would be having some sort of marking that indicates that the roadway can be shared or should be shared between cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers. And you can do that through a variety of different road markings. And those are all on local, lower volume roads where speeds are going to be lower. There's fewer conflicts between drivers and active transportation users. And those are mostly within the urban like the developed part of the town. As you start to move out into the more rural areas, you get into bike accessible shoulders, which are kind of the same idea, just in a rural environment. Great example of that would be Meenan's Cove, the new construction that was done on there, where you have these really wide shoulders that make it comfortable for you to be able to bike on. And those are all of the pink lines that kind of lace around the outside of the rural parts of the town. Now, unfortunately, we can't just wave a magic wand and have all that infrastructure appear. So we did some cost estimating for what all of that infrastructure would cost to construct. And if everything was at the low end of our estimate range, it would cost $11.5 million. If everything was at the high end of the range, it would cost $33.1 million. And that excludes a lot of the incidental elements, like engagement, engineering, mobilization, contingency, property acquisition, utilities, taxes, etc. Now, obviously that's a large sticker shock item, but partial funding can be obtained through government grants. And when developing this infrastructure, it is also important to consider that it costs, not only does it cost a lot of money to put it in the first place, but it does also cost money to maintain going forward. So using the existing budgets for trail maintenance and operation that the town currently has and just scaling that up to the larger trail network we proposed, the full plan would require an additional about $500,000 in trail operation maintenance and line painting per year. So that's just another thing to consider. And now on to other topics. So in the report, we have a couple pages talking about local transit opportunities. And when we say local, we're talking about moving within the community. So the COMEX that goes out to St. John is a little bit different from that. And with respect to things that can be done within the town, it is a little bit limited in terms of having a public transit system that would be cost effective because of the low number of in-town commutes. Really makes having like a fixed route or flex route service a challenge at specifically the town level. Though that's not to say that partnerships couldn't be expanded with St. John Transit or with Rothsay to get synergies there. And solutions that could, that improve the mobility of residents that might be a good fit would include collaboration with the Dial-A-Ride Fundy Regional Transportation Program, which is a volunteer driver program, as well as implementing a demand response transit program, which would require the town to have vehicles that are staffed to drive around, but it's done in a way that's much more like a volunteer driver program where somebody calls in a need for a ride and things get scheduled on a more ad hoc basis. Next. So as part of this project, we also updated or created policies to help establish a platform for transportation improvements throughout the town. The first one was that we updated the traffic calming policy to better align with the most recent version of the traffic calming guidelines that have been put out by the Transportation Association of Canada. So we made some modifications there. We also developed a rural paved shoulder policy that helped better align with what we were largely recommending in terms of the bike accessible shoulders through rural areas, as well as a couple other reasons why you might want to have a paved shoulder. And also looking at road surface, a road surface policy that was recommending different road surfacing types based on traffic volumes throughout the community. And last but not least, we also did an infrastructure condition review. So the objective of this was largely, at least in terms of roads and I believe culverts, to see how well the actual state of the infrastructure compares to the data that was in the town's asset management system, which has largely been updating on a year-by-year basis based on condition models, but without having people go out in the field to inspect everything. So in terms of road condition, I'm sure there'll be no surprises here. We found common issues of cracking, potholes, rutting, aggregate polishing, and patching. But what we observed out in the field corresponded well with the condition data that we were provided by the town's system. When we went out and looked at culverts, the deterioration of them was quite varied from culvert to culvert, which could be a function of environment or a variety of different issues. And I believe that was the last slide.
Thank you very much. Now, certainly a lot of work done on that, and you know, it's always exciting to see things change and evolve, and that's where Quispamsis is headed. So I will open this up now to council, or if we prefer to allow staff to continue working on this and ask our questions later, what is the pleasure? Okay. Councillor Luck, please.
I know that I was going to say deputy mayor, the director of engineering kind of leaned forward. I don't know if he has any comments before I ask a question.
I was leaning forward to see if there were questions. The context, as we touched on a little earlier, this is the sort of an overview of a larger document that will be made available to council members as well. Because we are looking at also things like different styles of road cross sections, so that will impact our budget, things of that nature. So I think for staff's clarification is if there are some overview questions, which I'm sure council members have, or policy type of questions that we can make sure that we have the proper answers for you. But I would encourage all of council members, now that you have the overview, we'll make sure that there's the report is available to you all to be able to review in greater detail. The information that was provided took into account, as Andrew mentioned, input from staff, but also we had the steering committee or the ad hoc committee that was provided from the AT group, where we took some of the recommendations that were brought forward from there. Those types of things are all part of the policy that we'll be generating over time to make sure that our future plans are consistent with the network that's being recommended or overseen for the community as a whole. The larger scale AT network map is one example of when we look at funding, the question of whether it's 11 million or 33 million, but it's a case of now we have an order of magnitude. How does council want to budget for that in the future? So those types of the decisions that will be coming back to you as well. The other thing that we take into account is as we do our own street network, we now can use this transportation master plan to say, oh, by the way, last year we would have just paved Susan Street, but this year, because we want to be consistent with our transportation master plan, Susan Street will be paved with a shoulder of X width. So those types of items will be brought forward at budget time, so the council is aware that we're incorporating the recommendations, not just at the whim of staff, but it's in conjunction with the transportation master plan. But that's just an overview, and I do appreciate that if there are some questions, that's great. I look forward to those as well.
Thank you, Mr. Logier. Did you want to go? No problem.
Thank you. Of course I have questions. So I guess I have a few, but one question I have, and it's something that I've heard that other provinces have done, and I know it would kind of come down to legislation, but I'm just wondering in terms of, like, for example, with Pettingill, I mean, we already have curbs, we have sidewalks. Has there ever been any kind of exploration or consideration in us thinking about sidewalks differently? And I mean, even just from kind of a professional standpoint in terms of using them more as multi-use trails or converting them into multi-use trails versus sidewalks, and, doing education so people know, again, respect and staying on one side or the other and announcing if you're coming up behind someone. I'm just wondering because, I use Pettingill as an example where, the road's quite narrow. It's a busy road. So in terms of biking on kind of a non-existing shoulder, if we could maybe look at ways, and I'm just wondering if you've seen those trends anywhere else, happening.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any specific examples, but certainly as we were going through this, we weren't necessarily thinking that the only surface a person would walk on would be a sidewalk. There were cases where we would be talking about putting in a multi-use trail, and that would be something that the multi-uses are pedestrian and cyclists. And I mean, like, that's currently the case on all of the trails that you have throughout the town. So yes, there can be a need to have some education campaigns around how to use the infrastructure appropriately and responsibly, which I know not everyone is the greatest at following. But yeah, that might be something that would be required, but there's no reason why you would have to have sidewalk if a trail was the more logical choice to be able to fit everything safely into your corridor.
And I guess I was thinking about converting sidewalks to multi-use. Like, so instead of having a sidewalk using that space to actually make it into a multi-use. And I believe right now with legislation, we can't do that because you're not allowed to bike on a sidewalk, but you can bike on a multi-use trail. So looking at sidewalks differently, I was just wondering, because I think in Nova Scotia, they changed the wording a little bit. So anyway, I just was wondering if you had heard of, kind of looking at that.
Okay, that specifically I've not heard
Okay.
of. But yeah, I know functionally the width of a sidewalk would not be well suited to having that sort of mixed transportation on. So like that would be the first main obstacle.
Okay. And then another question I had was, you did mention just the development. So it seems like there is a lot of stuff happening on potentially the other side of the arterial. And you were suggesting, the demand on the arterial is going to be higher. And potentially with some roundabouts up by Hampton, as well as Millennium Drive. I guess one thing that I didn't see, and I'm just wondering through its consideration, is it does divide our town, from east to west, about safety in terms of pedestrian crossing, because there's no crosswalk, and I know it's a provincial highway, but currently there is still no sidewalk anywhere along that arterial. And then also, even with the proposed maybe roundabouts in the future, there's still not a lot going on around Meehan's Cove, where people are trying to cross to get to the Qplex. So I think in the past, people talked about going under the highway. But again, I'm just wondering if there was any consideration around moving people safely across a very busy arterial. And it's only going to get busier.
Yeah, we didn't look at specific solutions for that corridor. There was a recommendation in the intersection upgrades for the arterial and Millennium that there would need to be pedestrian signal heads there in order to, basically like allow people to go through there safely. But by doing things like putting in roundabouts on those main intersections, it does usually make it easier to put in crosswalks. Because it's a lot nicer to just be able to look at one direction of traffic at a time, and then you cross, and then you look at the other direction of traffic and you cross. Though, I mean, of course, then working with DTI is a, I won't comment further. But yes, we didn't look at anything specific, but the document does lay out what all the criteria are for that TAC outlines for where you would locate crosswalks based on the pedestrian demand as well as the traffic volumes, and then what type of crosswalk you would put in. So whether it's just like ground-mounted signs, or if you have like the flashing lights or the overhead lights or anything like that, that's all also outlined in the report.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, very enlightening. So, I like the Palmer Brook extension from the park as well. I guess Councillor Locke just hit on the question I had was kind of to this last conversation you just talked about, is having more tunnels. Like you go to the Qplex, walking your dog, you can go under the road, trying to get from Monarch over. Like if you look at some, whether it's Calgary, but even St. John, you've got walking that goes over top that's caged in, so you can go across some of these. That's the only thing I saw that was missing, but you said it's in the report that you're going to talk about some of those things.
Yeah, the report didn't talk about specifically putting in tunnels or putting in pedestrian bridges. It talked about just crosswalks in general. I know that one challenge from a design perspective with those can be putting them in a very intuitive way so that people use them as opposed to bypassing them and crossing the road. But those would all be specific design examples, whereas this was of just a very high level document of kind of envisioning as opposed to doing specific design work.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any others? Okay, we will move on to, Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to thank you, Andrew, for your presentation on the Transportation Master Plan titled Revisioning Mobility in Quispamsis, and it be referred to the Engineering Department to seek public consultation and any comments or input from council members also be referred to the town's engineering department.
So it's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Olson on the question. Please vote now.
Mr. Miller?
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Moving on to item 5D. Proposed Gondola Point Road Corridor Scenic Road Designation. Please give your name for the clerk. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'm Ryan Esligar with Englobe.
Thank you. Welcome.
If I may, this is an offshoot, and when we spoke, when Andrew spoke about detailed studies, this is one of the items that came out of the review of our transportation master plan that warranted some detailed studies. Council, as we were going through the process, had specific requests to say, can we include this in the transportation master plan? Can we include that? The idea of a scenic route was intriguing in that it had a lot of specifics to be examined. And if it just stayed within the scope of the transportation master plan, then we would have essentially just general recommendations. We felt it was a significant enough idea that we extracted it from the transportation master plan and engaged Englobe to take this look at the Gondola Point corridor as one example. But it also is some synergies in that it will help us to envision how we would now use our transportation master plan when it comes to making decisions for future networks. So I think it was appropriate that we chose to put these on the same evening for presentation, because now we can see how they link. And sort of to build off on that, to Councillor Luck's questions about the crosswalks on the arterial, it's the same thing would apply is now if we have an example, if we say, okay, there's a demand for people crossing at a specific location on the arterial, we can then now investigate a specific option, whether it's a tunnel or a bridge or enhanced crosswalk at a specific location. As Andrew mentioned, a lot of the TAC standards are done on a warrant analysis, and that is, if you have no one crossing there, and we hope that they'll cross, and by building this, a lot of times that really doesn't come into play. But it's when it's warranted that they're most effective when these things come into play. So the Gondola Point corridor examination is very much warranted because we find ourselves at a stage where we have to make decisions about street infrastructure, the underwater or the underground sanitary sewer infrastructure, and council's desire to say, if we want to see this as a comprehensive AT network, what are we willing to sacrifice and to pay to have this recognized as a corridor? So this is the result of those questions and this overview that we want to throw some more ideas at council, Your Worship. So
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Okay, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, good evening again. So yeah, as Gary mentioned, this was a study that we started just over a year ago. So it was a kind of a preliminary study that focused on some potential options to consider for the Gondola Point corridor. So the presentation is not very long. I'll just go through the background, talk about the existing conditions that are out there now, and then review some cross-section alternatives that were presented. So the red line there is the section of Gondola Point Road that was the focus of the study. So it lies along the banks of the Kennebecasis River. It's an important collector road, and it connects residents in Rossay at the south end with residents in Quispamsis, including Quispamsis Road at the northern end of the corridor. Currently, the road has a rural feel to it, which leads to higher vehicle speeds, higher than we would generally like, I guess, for a 50 kilometer per hour speed limit. And it's also a popular destination amongst walkers and cyclists despite a lack of dedicated facilities. So I mean, it's in a nice area, you know, right along the river, nice views. So it's a great spot to go cycling or walking. So in terms of project goals and design philosophy, the intent here was to develop and implement a new vision for the corridor, which would include creating space for active transportation, reducing vehicle speeds, and also maximizing the scenic potential of the corridor. And as Andrew had touched on earlier in the master plan presentation, we were looking at a people-centric theme for this corridor, so where we focus on people and cycling first and basically motor vehicles last. Next slide, thanks. So we initially started off by collecting some additional traffic data. So there was some traffic data collected in 2019 by the town, and they provided that data to us. That's shown in the yellow arrows. And then we collected data at 2 locations shown in blue in early 2022. So this just indicates that at the southern end of the corridor, there's just under 1,000 vehicles per day in each direction. As we move further north, the vehicles decrease. And then north of Quispamsis Road, there's 100 to 300 vehicles per day in each direction. So that makes sense, just given the layout of the corridor. And then this slide, we have traffic speeds. So we have in black text is the average speed. In red text is the 85th percentile speed. And the 85th percentile speed is typically what we use to indicate what an appropriate speed limit would be. So the speed limit along the corridor is currently 50 kilometers per hour. And you'll notice near the center of the corridor, we had speeds upwards of 68 to 70 kilometers per hour as an 85th percentile speed. So that's 20 kilometers per hour higher than the posted speed limit. So that was an important observation to make, is that currently there are the speeds along the center of the corridor are higher than would be ideal for some options in terms of active transportation improvements. So we also reviewed the stormwater systems. So we looked at the drainage capacity using a 5-year and a 100-year plus 20% peak flow rate. And the conclusions were that the system is mostly sufficient to handle a 5-year storm. Roughly half of the system is insufficient for a 100-year plus 20% storm. So the conclusions there that when upgrades are made to the corridor, there's going to be some stormwater improvements that are required as well. We also looked at the pavement condition. So we did a visual inspection along the corridor, and we came up with some recommendations, but we also suggested that some coring should be done at some point to verify some of the visual recommendations. There were several forms of distress observed along the corridor, and some of the recommendations that were made in the report included milling and resurfacing to various depths based on the exhibited distresses, regrading in some areas to promote positive drainage, and there's also some areas that require some slope repair or stabilization where you can already see some materials starting to kind of fall away, primarily on the riverside. We also did a climate review. So some of the notable climate hazards include increased days with high temperature, a decrease in freeze-thaw cycles, an increase in maximum 5-day precipitation, increase in precipitation in general, and flooding. And for flooding, there were 5 areas along the corridor that were identified. So we looked at the 1 in 100-year flood level. So in the figure there's a kind of a thicker red line that runs along the corridor, and the one location where that arrow is in a location where the surface level of the roadway is below that 1 in 100-year flood level. So if we're doing upgrades, there's 5 spots where we would ideally want to raise the level of the road to mitigate against the potential for future flooding. So following a review, we came up with, there was 8 different cross-section options that were considered or discussed at some point. So we show the 8 there, but there were 4 that were focused on in more detail. So in each cross-section, we're changing various things. So for example, for the active transportation facilities, we looked at combinations of trails, wider shoulders, sidewalk, bike lanes. We also looked at varying the width of the travel lanes, and we also played with the number of travel lanes, whether we have a 2-lane road or restrict access to one way in one direction. We also did a weighted rating system for each option to try to develop and rank the options so we could compare them together based on various characteristics. And as I mentioned, there were ultimately four options that we chose to look at a little more detail. So I'm just going to discuss the four options that were looked at a little closer. This is option one. This is a bicycle accessible shoulder option. So this maintains the current character of the road. All we're doing here is we're widening the shoulders to have a 1.8 meter bicycle accessible shoulder. So TAC considers a shoulder that's 1.8 meters wide to be accessible to bicycles and also obviously pedestrians. So it would be used by both cyclists and pedestrians. So this would maintain the open ditches, so there wouldn't be any curb and gutter added. And on the right, there's a table there that has various impacts. So we assessed each option in terms of the right-of-way, which is in the top left. We had 12 points for that. The pedestrian accessibility is 8 points. Wheeled user accessibility, so basically cyclists was 8 points. Vehicle flow was 4 points. Vehicle speed was 4 points. Scenic multimodal potential, up to 8 points for that one. Cost, we assigned 8 points, and then there was an other category for a couple of them. So in each I won't go through the ranking for each one here, but basically where you see a solid green circle, you're getting maximum points for that category. If it's a solid white circle, you're getting no points for that category. If it's a quarter circle, you're getting a quarter of the points. So in this case, we got a total score of 16, which ranked number 8. So this one has a lower cost because we're maintaining the open ditches. We're not adding curb and gutter, but it really doesn't do much for pedestrians and cyclists because you're still, you basically are still cycling or walking on the shoulder. This is just a plan view of that option. So again, it's maintaining a similar characteristic of what's out there now. We have one travel lane in each direction, 1.8 meter paved shoulder, and then the green area is just your open ditch on both sides of the road. So this is option 2. This is an advisory bike lane option, and this is a relatively newer kind of facility that there's none around here that I'm aware of, but they're used elsewhere in other parts of the country and in the United States. So the intent here is you have one center lane up the middle of the road. I think it's 3.5 meters, I believe, that we had shown there. So you've got one center lane, and then you've got 2 shoulders on the sides that are intended for use by cyclists. So the intent is that cyclists stay on the outside, the cars in the middle, but it accommodates two-way traffic. So if 2 cars come across each other, they're then allowed to move out and use the full width of the road. So this facility is only appropriate for lower speed and lower volume roads. So it was one that we wanted to look at because we're looking to have a scenic, unique facility. But the conclusion here is that with the current speeds out there and the volumes, this really wasn't an option for this facility. So we did want to include it just to say that it was looked at in case that was a question that came up. So option 4 is a multi-use path with one-way traffic. So in this case, we were looking at making the section of Gondola Point Road from Quispamsis Road down to Hillhurst one-way southbound. And so that's the red line there. And then the blue line north of Quispamsis Road. There were 2 options that we could consider. One is to keep that 2-way. And we were also looking at a one-way connection onto the Gondola Point Arterial. And if that were to be an option, you could make the northern end one-way northbound. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is the cross-section. So this is showing the cross-section on the one-way southbound section. So we've got one travel lane, a 6-meter wide travel lane heading southbound. We'd have a boulevard on one side with a multi-use path that's separated from the roadway. So this one has benefits in terms of right-of-way because we've got the one travel lane allows us to narrow up the road and save some space. It's also good for pedestrians and cyclists because we have a separated facility. Obviously the one-way traffic is a negative in terms of vehicle flow. It would limit traffic to one direction. Also, I guess in terms of vehicle speed, having the one wider lane could encourage higher speeds potentially. Again, we have the pedestrians and cyclists separated from the vehicles, so that is still a bonus there. In terms of scenic multimodal potential, it ranked high there because it would provide you with an active transportation facility right along the river side of the corridor. And I guess in the other category on this one, we had -2 points because we reached out to the local fire department and they obviously had concerns with a one-way facility. So it would impact potentially emergency response times in the area. So that was another negative for this option. And this is a plan view of that option. So again, one travel lane in the southbound direction with a boulevard and then a multi-use trail outside of the boulevard. And the fourth option that was looked at a little closer is similar to option 4. This was labeled option 7, but it's the same thing, but with two-way traffic. So in this case, yeah, we're maintaining 2 travel lanes in each direction. We have a boulevard and then the multi-use trail. So this ranked a little bit higher than the other option, option 4. Again, vehicle flow, we get full points there because we have the 2 lanes in each direction. This would require a little bit more space, obviously, with the wider road to accommodate the 2 travel lanes. It was an extra 2 meters. So overall, we felt this is probably the best option. Again, one issue potentially is just impacts the right of way. So these 2 options, the option 2 and option 7, would fit within the current right of way, but there are some spots along the corridor where there's people currently parking their cars in a driveway or a parking area that is within the town's right of way. So there would be some areas where there could be impacts to driveways and that sort of thing. And this is the plan view of option 7. So again, showing the two-way traffic with the boulevard and trail. So a little conclusion at the end. So option 1, which was the bicycle accessible shoulders, it appears feasible but doesn't meet AT or scenic objectives of the corridor. Again, it's maintaining a similar characteristic to what's out there now. Option 7, as I just mentioned, is preferred over option 4. So option 7 being the two-way option with the multi-use trail. And then option 4, that was the advisory bike lanes. Option 4 was the one-way option. So another scenario here is we could consider option 4 north of Quispamsis Road. In that area, there's less available right-of-way. And we could consider that one way if we have this connection onto the Gondola Point arterial. So this is what I mentioned earlier. This would require permission from DTI, but in this case, we would be extending the Gondola Point Road out to connect onto the arterial. It would be a one-way entrance onto the arterial heading east. And the figure there shows that connection with the trail crossing the arterial to provide access to the beach. So that would require further discussion with DTI, but it was another option to consider. And I believe, that was the end of the presentation. So we had some drawings that were included of 3 of the options.
Thank you very much. I will open this for council to make their comments. I will go to Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. Well done. Through you, Your Worship, I don't know, to the Director of Engineering or Ryan himself. When I look at option 7, it looks the best as well. But I also look the way the picture is drawn up for 599 Gondola Point Road, and I'm looking at the actual specifics of where that house is. I think it goes farther, and this is a question: does it go farther than what we're allowed? Because it looks like in the drawing, the rendering, that we're going to be taking up half of their driveway and half of their front yard. And if I look at 599 Gondola Point, it backs right onto the water. So you basically would take over half of their yard off. So my question is is there flex there? Because I'm looking where Lionel Drive is and stuff like that. Can you go a bit more to the right versus, I don't know if our right-of-way goes as far as what the renderings were. That's kind of my question. I know these are just examples, but it looks nice drawn, but then when I look at what it's taking out, you're taking out somebody's half of their front lawn. So.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just reiterate, these are very preliminary drawings. So there would be areas where we could reduce the boulevard more than what we're showing on the drawing. Also, if we went with the trail, ideally you have a 3.5 meter trail, but we can reduce that to 3 meters. You could go slightly lower than that for a short section of time if you had a conflict with the driveway. So yeah, there's no question that the trail will create some challenges with accommodating driveways, but that would be looked at. I guess if the direction was to proceed with that option, that would be looked at in more detail as we get further into the design. Yep.
Sorry, apologize, Worship, but going down, when I'm looking, if you're going down towards the ferry, I mean, there's no, I'm just looking at that house specifically. I know there's a big embankment on the right-hand side just past Lionel, but even if you went over a couple more feet there, it would still. Anyways.
Yeah, the corridor could be shifted, a meter one way or another, depending on the constraints that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I'll go to Councillor Olson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. I guess I was looking for suggestions on where there could be some sort of vehicle parking, so you could maximize the presence of the water and all that stuff. And my understanding is that, or my impression is that, not option 7, the pedestrian walking is next to the river.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so looks like a lot of land that has to be recaptured there, to maximize that. And but I guess that this is sort of an initial overview without a lot of specific details, as you just mentioned there. So, but I like the idea of the pedestrian walkway that is going to be by itself on the riverside. And I don't know whether I would imagine that the best parking area, if you would think about it for traffic, would be on the pedestrian side, on the water side, so you don't get people parking on the house side and then having to walk across the road, for safety reasons.
Yes, I agree. If there's some places that we can accommodate some parking, you'd be able to park your vehicle there and walk right onto the trail. No. And that was included in our scope to look at a couple of areas that we could potentially use for some additional parking.
Yeah, it's just an area, I guess, that would possibly encourage people to stop and take advantage of that particular location, which might be the most unique in the whole road, to take pictures or, even have a picnic or something. I don't know. But no, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Mr. Roger, please.
Your Worship, through you, one of the things that we had looked at as part of this is the town does own pump stations along the Ganola Point Road on the water side. And as part of the pump station review that we're going to be undertaking in the next few years, we'll be looking at resizing or reconfiguring the locations of these stations within those properties. And all of the sites are larger than the pump stations currently need. So it would be a combination of redesigning some of the lift stations, making those areas accessible for temporary parking, of scenic views, because we're looking at a couple of things, replacing 3 lift stations, improving the quality of the effluent going out through that way, so that becomes a concern, but also making them accessible. And we've talked about in other discussions under AT, is if we wanted to take one of the lift stations and design it so that it had a public accessible washroom facility, such as Ross A put down just down by the Renforth beach down that way. So those types of things are all on the table, definitely. And with respect to the widths comment from Councillor Miller, as we get into details, a little bit of storm sewer on one side, and you can push everything to one side, and now you've gained those right-of-way widths that you need to get. So it all goes down to similar to the Transportation Master Plan, that $11 to $33 million budget. It depends on the commitment that council wants to make to the AT network, to the scenic route that we're proposing. And if we phase it, we might be able to get grants, things of that nature. It can be done. It can be done. So this is really to demonstrate to council that it was a request that was made. The vision was there, which is your role to throw those visions out. It is something that can be achieved. Now the question becomes, do you want us to go forward and achieve it? You know, obviously get public input and things like that, but if this is something that we want to move forward on.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I mean, I love active transportation. I'm all over the scenic route. I'm still kind of wondering if this is the right spot. We have such beautiful locations in our town, and we're trying to cram a lot of stuff into a very small area. I guess I just want to look at option 1 versus option 7, because option 1, the rationale was it doesn't meet AT standards or meet the scenic objectives. But option 1 was recommending bike accessible shoulders, which is what the master transportation plan recommended for a big portion of our rural roads, which would have basically, you know, speeds would be even higher, even like posted speeds are higher on Means Cove and Model Farm and all those areas, which would be a huge improvement to what it is now. So I guess I'm just wondering, you know, was there any consideration of even just protected, but you know, like in some of the cities they have, you know, kind of things that they can attach to the pavement so that the bike lane, even though it's part of the road and it's wider, you know, there's a kind of a defined area, so it keeps pedestrians and cyclists safe because the drivers know where their lanes are and, you know, they can't venture into the shoulder. I'm just wondering because it does look like in terms of cost, knowing, you know, the cost of paving these days, you know, not that if we had all the money in the world, I love the idea. I'm just wondering when we think about all the other things we have to do in our town, it looks like a very big, beautiful, amazing project. But, you know, in terms of priority and looking at the cost of having to pave other roads just to pave them so we can drive on, I'm just wondering, I guess, the thoughts of, you know, why option 1, even though I want option 7, was kind of ruled out when we're proposing that for a lot of the other areas as well. Like the bottom of Means Cove is beautiful, and I'm sure people would be absolutely thrilled with having something like that compared to what they even have now on Ganola Point Road. So I don't know if you can.
Yeah, so I mean, option 1, the one that was ruled out was option 2. Option 1, we're not recommending against it, but it doesn't, the big difference between option 1 and the other option 4 and 7 is that it doesn't provide a separated AT facility. So as to your question about whether we looked at, like you could have delineators or something along the shoulder, we didn't look at that specifically. I mean, people could still technically drive through delineators and hit a pedestrian. So we were still trying to, you know, we presented option 1 as an option. It is an option that could be considered. But I think the question that was mainly presented to council is, you know, if that's the direction that you guys want us to go, that's fine. But do we want to do that, or do we want to look at, you know, a facility that does provide a better level of comfort for pedestrians and cyclists? And yeah, the big thing here is there's no easy answer. Like that's why we're here, right? There's several options to choose from, and each of them have pros and cons. And we have to, I guess, figure out what we want to prioritize over the other.
I do have one other question. The other question I have is the way, again, love the idea, but the way it's proposed now in option 7, are we going to make sure that the people, because it is going to affect a lot of the homeowners along the water, because there's going to be people literally right on top of their house enjoying the view. I'm just wondering, I'm guessing as part of this process, we will have them weigh in on, you know, ideas and which options they prefer as well.
Yeah, we'd planned like public engagement specifically with residents along the corridor. Okay. That was included in our scope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. I will go to Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the do-over. My question would be just, I love all the ideas, but I think it's very prudent that when we do the public presentation that we also have estimated costs if we have such a thing, because we say it's cost less, cost more. It'd be nice to say this is X million, this is X plus 6 million as an example, because we'd all love to see that, but it's also if this, you know, anyways, it's just if there could be an estimated cost with each option is just a nice thing for now, even when people do consulting, because everybody wants, you know, I go shopping, I like something, and then I turn around and I see the price, I really like it, but I'm gonna go over here. So just a suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Mr. Loge.
Yes, Your Worship, and sort of give the overview. Where you saw we had the 8 options that were identified. You know, the purpose of this is to make sure that the 4 that we have, or the 3 that we narrowed down to, council's on board with that, and then we structured exactly for that. This is a Class D estimate, or this is a Class C, or these are the areas that the residents have to be engaged. Questions like, yeah, we recognize that it'll have to be moved a little bit on one side. That'll involve storm sewer. So rather than starting a big picture, we wanted to make the presentation, get it somewhat narrowed down to council. Then we can focus a little bit more on those specifics as we go.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Councillor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Director, perhaps, of Engineering and Works, I'm just hearkening back in my mind to the kind of the original concept when this was first brought to us, and I think the Deputy Mayor might have been the progenitor of this, and as has been said by Councillor Miller and Councillor Luck really as well, I mean, there's no doubt that the Gondola Point Road is a lovely, picturesque, you know, area, and I had this image in my head, almost sort of like the Irving Nature Park, where you sort of, you know, as you meet, the road is Gondola Point Road is Gondola Point Road, but as you go along, that there are sort of stops and lookouts and so on. Am I wrong that was part of the original discussion around this? And if so, if I was correct about that, maybe I'm just getting too far ahead of ourselves here. But I just am wondering, Councillor Olson made a comment about parking, and I mean, obviously if this is to be if the concept here is for this to become a destination sort of area, well, from where? I mean, obviously it's not meant for just the people that live in Gondola Point Road. They already have wonderful views of the river. Lucky devils. One of my best friends lives not on the water side, and we sit out front and enjoy it as many summer nights as we can because it's so beautiful. But the traffic that would increase there, and in an area that's already fairly congested, you know, it's pretty tight, and we're here discussing how can we shift things 2 feet this way, 2 feet that way. I just like, is that part of the concept as we go forward to consider those kinds of let's call them touristy type aspects? Thanks.
Yes, it was, Your Worship. Everything from the scenic routes, just driving for the vista alone. But this was chosen as a marriage of the AT initiative and the Vista initiative. When we spoke a little earlier about pedestrian crossings on the arterial, and if nobody crosses the arterial in a certain location, then why are you putting a sidewalk there? But the same thing can be said as, okay, if nobody's walking on the Gondola Point Road, or are they walking on the Means Cove Road, or where is the traffic? We've got demonstrated that the Gondola Point Road is a high pedestrian cycling destination already. So why would we not enhance what we have as opposed to a more rural area where there's nobody there, and we're building it with the hopes that they will go there. So this is an illustration of marrying the two scenarios. Yes, the Transportation Master Plan, we did look at a discussion of scenic routes in general, and really that is a case of linking park to park. So would people park at the Means Cove Park, walk to the bike park up around or bike to the bike park around the corner, or would they stroll all the way to the Hammond River Park? What would be involved in that type of a movement? Here we're looking at a corridor that is already demonstrated a high use outside of vehicles alone, and on the flip side, by introducing pedestrians and AT uses, now we have a mechanism or a reason to drop the speeds as well. You drop speed, sometimes that will drop the traffic volumes. So now you're narrowing streets to get around a house that may be too close, and you've narrowed it down from a 3.5 meter lane to a 2.75 meter lane with a center line. Now all of a sudden, cars are showing up and they're slowing down because there's visual, Andrew, you talked about the visual keys to slow down traffic. This is what would be the prime example of we're using visual keys to slow speeds down. And we have to go beyond, beyond just is it a Vista thing. This is a full street design package. The same thing that we would have to do with the Hampton Road when the time comes, because there's not going to be any use for us to say, oh, we're just going to pave the Hampton Road. The next design on the Hampton Road is going to have either it's walking lanes, bike lanes, water main construction, everything, underground power, decorative street lights. What's going to be on that? That's going to be the next vision for that. So we don't think from a staff perspective, it's really useful to just sort of take bits and pieces. We want to give you the comprehensive package and say, okay, this is what it could be. Are you okay with this? If not, then that makes our a lot easier, that we won't come back to you with things like this. But the discussion that we had in the past with members of council was that, yeah, let's think big, and then we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And just as a follow up, and yeah, I agree with you. We talk about the Hampton Road, and I mean that's the central traffic corridor of the entire town, and thousands of cars traverse that each day. I'm sure. And I guess I just am trying to, in my mind, picture the ultimate sort of value add of this. I mean, beautification and creating a way for people to enjoy it more broadly than they can, and in a safer way than they currently can, is a very fine argument. But I hope that I hope we can locate budget to manage something like this. And you bring up Hampton Road, and I'm concerned about from the master transportation plan sort of has a vague outlook on a deeper corridor study that has to be done to be able to determine what can be done with Hampton Road. And this is offering 8 specific options that, although I understand they are preliminary, are fairly, in pretty good relief compared to, generally speaking, about Hampton Road. And I'm concerned about water infrastructure upgrade. And I think about the commercial and taxation income potential of spending our efforts there. I understand that it's, as my grandmother would say, bigger than a bread box, And what does one have to do with the other outside of budgeting? Perhaps nothing. But and I say let's do both. Let's do everything we can, But anyway, So there are concepts that have been brought forward about the idea of this being a spot where people would, stroll along and stop, and there'd be some sort of a lookout area of some kind for people to sort of leisurely enjoy as they go along. Yes, is that correct? Sorry if I'm asking the same question again.
So this is, as I said, that marriage of AT and connection, but it would have the ability to say, okay, now somebody's walking from the Qplex and they're going to walk all along this road. Now, I don't want to talk about neighbors, but they say, okay, but you go so far and it's just a shoulder, and I go next door and you got a paved sidewalk. Like, why can't you match up? Or you go drive down to the golf course and they got a sidewalk down there and blah blah blah. Okay, why can't you have nice things here? Like these are the types of things that you would have to have. So now we're looking at this as an example of what we could do. The 8 options that you've identified are very much applicable. That's one of the good things about this particular report, is the same outlines and templates that are identified can be used in pretty much any location in the town. So now we've got some familiarity with what we're using. The other thing to take into account is on the Gondola Point Road, we talked about pump stations. I've got 3 pump stations. I got to tear up the street anyway. Am I going to tear it up to just put it back what it was, or am I going to tear it up and say, oh, by the way, when we reinstate the road, let's grab ourselves a little bit more shoulder because this is what we want to do. So there's going to be some economies by knowing what the vision is when we undertake some of the infrastructure work that we have. Recognizing 100% budget is a concern. Where do we want to expend our monies? But I think all the signals that we've received from council and the studies and the input from the public is that you do a couple of nice things and people really appreciate it and they will use it. And we have the ability with a design like this to control speeds, volumes, traffic. And that's all we can do from a public perspective is do the best we can to make sure that people are using it safely.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Thank you, Councillor Bicker. And I'll remove myself from the chair. Councillor Locke, if that's okay with you, you'll be the chair. Those were some of the similar concerns that I had, road raising, because when I look at, when you typically look at riverbank houses that, there were a lot of cottages along there when I was a kid, the road wasn't built up to the degree that perhaps it should have been for year-round homes. And the impact on the existing homes now was certainly a concern, because if the road goes up and the house is still down, there's, potential issues there. The widening of shoulders, but yet maintaining the culverts or the trench drainage that we have there. Walking along that road, I know that it needs improvement, but I also know that some people have their lawns right to the shoulder of the road. So those were just some of the concerns that I had as well. That and certainly the issue that Mr. Loge just addressed with water on the Hampton Road and widening the road here. I'm glad that what we have now with the 8 versions is a template that we can apply to various areas throughout the town, because it's going to be easier now to look at those and say, what can we extrapolate from what you've done and apply it to the Hampton Road so that we've got water coming down and we have potential for new construction and revenue coming in from, increasing the tax base. So thank you. Thank you, Councillor Luck. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move Mr. S. Lagar be thanked for Englobe's presentation on the Gondola Point Road corridor, preliminary design options, and it be referred to the engineering department to seek public consultation, and any comments and or input from council members be referred to the town's engineering department.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried unanimously, 6-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here this evening and for the wonderful reports that you've shared with us this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Safe
Your
travels
Worship and
home.
Council.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well. Item number 6, public hearings. There are none. Item number 7, minutes of the previous meeting. Item A. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. I would move that those minutes be approved as prepared.
It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried unanimously, 6-0. Item number 8A, unfinished business, purchasing policy update, tendering process, staff report from the town treasurer. You had the report in your kit. And Ms. Brandon, would you like to speak to that at all? Or we can go to a motion. Ms. Brandon?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, just that, we had come back to council earlier this year to update our limits. Then what we've done now is we've just done some cleanup changes. We've had a fulsome legal review. We've added in pieces on the MB First procurement strategy within our purchasing policy, gotten rid of a few kind of administrative kind of hang-ups, and just overall just updated and refreshed the policy to be in alignment with all of the acts and legislation that's required of us.
Thank you very much for the update. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that council approve the updated new purchasing policy number 075 that aligns with the town's strategic plan and all applicable legislation and agreements, thus rescinding the current purchasing policy number 068.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, Councillor Thompson, did you have anything on that? No? Seeing Councillor Olson, you didn't? Seeing there are none, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Item number 9, correspondence. Paula Copeland, resignation from Imperial Theatre Board of Directors. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. I would move that Miss Paula Copeland be thanked for her dedicated service and her valuable contributions made to the Imperial Theatre Board of Directors over the past 8 years, and that the vacancy on the Imperial Theatre Board be referred to the nominating committee for review and recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Luck. On the question, seeing there are none, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Item 10, bylaws, there are none. Item number 11, new business. Tender number 2023.
No, that was moved.
Oh.
To business arising. Yeah.
Business arising.
Just go to reports.
Okay, we will go to reports, please. Item A, Quispamsis Planning Advisory Committee. Councillor Donovan.
I would move that the reports be received and filed.
It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Business arising from Committee of the Whole.
That's where it was moved to, so you can read that item now. That was under your paper copy.
Oh,
Under new business. The tender. Just read that.
okay. Tender number 2023 TQ04-8, street upgrades, verbal update from Director of Engineering and Works. Mr. Loge.
Your Worship, the last week we had the opportunity to put out our tender. We received quotes. Our budget for the project was $2 million and $2.01 million, so $2,012,000. We received 3 bids. Of the 3 bids, they were all in excess of $1 million over our budget estimate. At this time, it's staff recommendation that we reject all the bids and we not award a street capital tender at this time. We'll be making additional reports to council on follow-up to what we would do with the proposed streets for the 2023 capital program, and whether that is to carry them over to 2024 or to look at specific streets for repairs. But at this time, we didn't feel it was fiscally responsible to advise council to award a project that was 30% over budget.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move that all 2023 capital street upgrade tenders received be rejected by council, as the lowest tender package came in $1.3 million over budget, and this item can be referred back to staff.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Donovan. On the question, Please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Final item this evening. Before we leave, don't forget Toronto's playing tonight. Fingers crossed.
Is Montreal playing?
Montreal's gone. Looking for an adjournment, please. It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Miller on the question. Please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Safe travels home, everybody. Have a good night.